This is going to be a full body morning mobility routine utilizing functional range conditioning coupled with some passive range liftoffs and some kinetic stretching. Please try to control the joint that's being moved and try not to move anything else. And during the passive range liftoffs, take an inhale, irradiate, and then lift off. Begin by standing or kneeling, squeeze the fists, keep everything tight. We're going to go ahead and start by flexing the neck, rotating, bending to one side, and then looking over the shoulder. Notice that everything is tight. My shoulders aren't going up and down. My arms aren't moving. My chest is not moving. My abs aren't moving. I'm going 3 rotations one way and 3 rotations the other way. So this would be a neck controlled articular rotation, exploring end range. If there's any pain, just go around the pain. Cross the arms across the chest for your thoracic spine. You just flex the upper back forward, rotate, bend into the side, extend, and work your way to the other side. Laterally bend, rotate, flex forward. So rotate to one side, bend, shoulder to hip, extend, shoulder to hip, rotate forward and down. And one more rotation, all the way back, and rotate to the other side, bend, flex forward. So get in 3 circles one way, 3 circles the other way. I really like my legs nice and wide. I feel like my hips don't go forward and back as much. So typically, if you're standing, your hips are going to want to go forward and back. Just try to keep them straight for that. For your scapula, go into a kneeling position, opposite arm, opposite leg forward. So right arm forward, left foot forward, and you're rotating that scap, protracting, retracting, elevation, depression, all the way in a circle one way, all the way in a circle the other way. We don't want the hand out in front of the shoulder. We want to go out about 10 degrees, as you see here. Squeezing the fist, keeping the elbow straight is probably the most important part. Sometimes the wrist tends to flex or the elbow begins to bend. So we're trying to keep the elbow and fist nice and tight. So this would be a scapular car. 3 rotations one way, 3 rotations the other way, and you're just moving your scapula and nothing else. Here we have a kneeling shoulder car. So flexion, internal rotation, extension. You're turning to the back of the hand so the back of the hand reaches the next side of the body. And extension, external rotation, flexion, all the way forward and across and down, across and up, deflection, internal rotation, reach back. Notice that nothing else is moving except for the shoulder. And remember, go in your full range of motion. If you can't complete a full circle, just do the best that you can without moving anything else. So you're trying to block the motion of the neck, block the motion of the opposite shoulder. Notice that I'm bringing my left shoulder here. I want to bring that back and complete your 3rd circle. And so we'll get the other side. Flexion, internal rotation, extension, back of the hand touches the side of the body. Extension, external rotation, flexion, abduction across the body and down, across and up, back, twist, turn, back of the hand reaches the body, extend, externally rotate, all the way to flexion, forward and across, one more, forward and across, internal rotation, extension, abduction, abduction to extension, external rotation, deflection, all the way to abduction. So that would be a shoulder controlled articular rotation. And we're going to get the elbows, palms face forward, supination, pronation, and extension. And this is all the elbow joint here. So supination, flexion, pronation, extension, and then pronation, flexion, supination, extension. Just trying to follow me here, keeping the elbows super tight here. Nothing else moves except for the elbows. Really squeezing the biceps and triceps here. The next thing we'll get is our wrists. Wrists go out in front of the elbows. Bend the elbows 90 degrees. Glue the elbows next to the rib cage. And you're just taking your wrist through a full range of motion, through a full circle, all the way from extension to flexion. You're going to go out
3 times and in 3 times. You're going to go all the way out and around, all the way up, in, and down. And then you're going to go the other way, up, out, and down, in, up, out, and down. And for wrists and ankles, you can generally get 3 to 5 circles. They tend to be a little bit faster than your shoulder or any other joint. From here, we'll get the hip in a quadruped position, gluing the hands into the ground, trying not to move the back. You're going to go with flexion with the hip, abduction, internal rotation all the way to extension, and then back down and forward, all the way out and around. And you're trying not to move anything but the hip. So if your back starts to move or if your arms start to move, try to block that. Taking your hip through its full range of motion here, you can get about 3 circles one way and 3 circles the other way. You want to make sure that that knee is 90 degrees and the foot is dorsiflexed the whole time. If you have a tough time keeping the knee bent, you can put a tennis ball behind the back of your knee while you do this, or a cloth, just so you know that you're doing it the right way. That's what I did when I started. And then also maybe putting a block on your back if you feel like your back is moving, and making sure that you're keeping everything tight through this full range of motion and your knee bent at 90 degrees, and you're getting your full hip circle here on both sides. About 3 rotations one way, 3 rotations the other way, and that would be a hip controlled articular rotation. Next, we'll get our knees. Hold on to the back of the hamstring, pull the thigh up toward the chest, externally rotate, extend, flexion, and in and down. So noticing that I'm moving my foot out and in, so out, in, down, in and up, out and down, in, up, out and down, in, up, out and down. Okay, and now we're just going to get the ankle all the way up, in, down, and out, up, in, down, and out, and the other way. Full circles here, go as slow as you can. It's not a race. And just exploring your full range of motion of the ankle, about 3 to 5 circles one way, 3 to 5 circles the other way. After your ankle, we'll go ahead and get into the toes. What we'll do here is place the foot on the ground, pull the shin toward the chest, and just bring the toes up off the ground, big toes up, and then small toes down. And then we're going to switch. So big toes up and then small toes down. And after we do a couple rounds of that, we're going to piano the toes down from pinky to big toe. And after we do that, we'll keep all 5 toes up and just tap the big toe down. And you can perform 3 reps of that, 3 reps of the piano, and 2 reps of a hold with the big toe up and all the small toes up. So that's working intrinsic foot strength here and really trying to control each movement. And then lastly, on this side, we'll get the patella, pushing the patella around in a circle. This is going to be the only car that will do that our leg is actually totally relaxed. And we're pushing that patella in a full circle with our thumbs through our pants, or if the pants aren't there, then you just push the kneecap around in a full 360-degree circle. If there's any pain, just go away from the pain, but know that your patella should be able to move, and if it doesn't move, then that might be an issue. And if you do have an issue like that, that's something that you can comment below or message me, and I can maybe help you through. So here we're getting the other side, out, up, in, down, out, up, and down, in and up, out and down, in and up, out and down, in and up, out and down. And then we'll get our ankle. After a couple more here, you can go in either direction, out and up, down and in, whatever you'd like, just making sure that you're externally and internally rotating that tibia. Here we're getting our full circles of our ankle, about 2 one way, 2 the other, 3 one way, 3 the other, going about 3 to 4 circles here, and just kind of really controlling that, noticing if it's harder to go out or in, and trying to create a full circle with your ankles. After that, we'll get our toes on this side. It'll be the same process. we will put one big toe down and all 4 toes up. We'll hold it for about 5 seconds, and then we switch. And then it'll be big toe down, small toes up, small toes down, big toes up. And what we're doing is trying to really get that big toe up off the ground when we do that, and also when we get those small toes up as high as we can. And then we'll piano those toes down from pinky to big toe. Do that about 3 times, and then you'll tap the big toe on the ground 3 times, and that'll complete your full mobility of the toes here, getting outside, inside, and really trying to separate those toes the best that you can. So finishing up here, perform a couple more, all toes up, and then piano them down to big toe, and then again tapping the big toe on the ground 3 times after all the toes are up. After that, we'll get the patella on the opposite side. Remember that when you're pushing the patella around in a circle with your thumbs, that your leg should be totally relaxed, because if you are trying to straighten your knee, then patella won't move. So pushing the patella around in a 360-degree circle, going around about 3 times one way and about 3 times the other way. Checking for pain. If there is pain, it's going to give you a self-assessment to let you know that you have a knee issue, and that's something that you might need to get taken care of. Now what we're going to do is some spinal segmentation. Getting in the quadruped position, we're going to start with a rounded back and tuck the chin, tuck the pelvis, and slowly 1 vertebrae at a time from the lower back all the way to the mid back and all the way up to the head. We're going to segment, and we're going to retract the shoulders and then bring the head up last. We'll do that one more time, starting again at the low spine and working our way all the way up. And sometimes if you had somebody try to maybe touch the spinal cord as you move it, that can help stimulate each vertebrae. And as you see, I'm skipping some vertebrae, and you really want to try to go 1 vertebrae at a time and try not to skip. So when you're doing that, take some video to see how that looks. In my vantage point right now, it looks okay, but it definitely could be a lot better. From here, we're going to do some wrist extension. We're just basically going to move back and forth with our fingertips toward our body, palms facing the ground, just kind of rock back and forth. This would be called a kinetic stretch, where we're moving through the stretch in our end range. This is slightly passive but also active, because we're putting force when we move forward, and then you can also switch the palms so the fingertips are facing forward, leaning over them, getting a kinetic stretch in the wrist. After that, we can do some passive range liftoffs. So trying to go in your regressive angular load there, what we call a RAL, or passive range liftoff. And what you're doing is you're going into extension and you're trying to lift off away from the ground. So you're going actually deeper into wrist extension. This is going to help cause a little bit more neurological drive in that area and help strengthen the wrists. Here we have wrist flexion. We're going to hold it passively. You don't want to press too hard, and then what we're going to do is actively try to flex the palms or the fingertips toward the body. If you can, try to make a fist. When I first started doing this, I felt like my wrist was going to break, so you have to take your time with this, and you have to go very low intensity to start. From here, I'm pushing out, and I'm going with 1 flexion of the wrist and 1 extension of the wrist. You're going to feel a lot of neurological activity through the triceps, through the shoulders, through the biceps, through the wrists. I really like this one. Gets a lot of neurological drive throughout the entire system here. Very good for active wrist extension and flexion. Here we have elbow cars in the abduction. So supinate, externally rotate, flex, pronate, extend, internally rotate. Externally rotate, internally rotate. So these would be shoulder axials. So we're in full internal rotation, and then we go to full external rotation. You can do this with the palms open, or you can do this with your fist closed.
So noticing that I have my left shoulder a little bit higher than my right shoulder. Those are some things you want to maybe try to straighten out. Maybe my left shoulder is hiking up a little bit. Maybe I want to bring it down. Maybe I'm elevating my scapula, which I don't need to do right here. So right now I'm just focusing on shoulder axials. And axials basically means internal to external rotation. So you could do this for your hips. You could also do it for your shoulders. So anything that allows you to do both. Here we have a swimmer hover going out like a T, internally rotate, elbow hinge behind the back of the hands, touch the back, relax, then hinge away, externally rotate all the way to flexion, and then hands behind the head. From here, we'll target our elbow. This is called an elbow hinge. We're going to find full shoulder extension to start. And then from here, what we're going to do is squeeze the fists, flex the elbow from extension, and then extend the elbow. This will be harder if you really go into full shoulder extension first and try not to move out of the shoulder extension. This is going to challenge your elbow. You can do this. I have a neutral arm position here, so I'm not supinated or pronated. And right now I'm just squeezing, keeping those elbows back as far as I can, and this would be called elbow hinge. From here, scapular cars, utilizing the ground to create radiation and some barrier. So what we're doing is basically moving our scapula in a full circle. We're going to go about 3 times forward and around, and then 3 times back and around. Remember, your scapula elevates, depresses, retracts, and protracts. I'm moving my head probably a little bit too much, but I am trying to just focus on my scapula, my wing bones, moving around in circles there. Here we'll go into the thread of the needle. I like this one because you can do some active and passive. So starting off passive hold, and then your active stretch would be pressing the back of the hand, the back of the shoulder into the ground from 0 to 100%, and then after that trying to pull through even deeper into the stretch. From here I want to make sure that my knees are wide and my feet are wide, and that I'm not leaning over. So let's just say for this side, I thread my right arm through. I want to shift my hips slightly to the left, and I'm pushing the back of my hand into the ground, and then I'm trying to pull through a little bit further. So you can push into the ground, pull into the ground, and then also just hold there passively. Really good for the rear deltoid and thoracic spine. Here we have some combat stance. We are getting dorsiflexion of the ankle, and we're doing it in a kinetic fashion where we're moving back and forth. If you're not able to do this on the ground, you can also do this on the box. Again, if you wanted to turn this into an active stretch, what you would do is hold this position passively first for about a minute, and then begin to press the front of the foot into the ground from 0 to about 100%, and then pull the toe up toward the shin. So that would be your pals and rals. As demonstrated, it's the kinetic stretch of dorsiflexion, which I like to do once in a while. I think it's really important to just see how the ankle feels, especially if you're going to be doing any type of jumping or running where most of the impact comes from that area. So this would be dorsiflexion of the ankle. Also a good prep for squatting, front squats, and any other type of low body lifts. The next exercise we'll perform will be a straddle axial. So we're going to just pancake the legs out in front of us. Go to your safest range. If you need the wall for support here, definitely use it. And what we're going to do is go from internal to external rotation with our feet dorsiflexed. So internal and external rotation of the hips, and our feet, our toes are pointing up. I'm trying to really get those outer feet to touch the ground and inner feet to go all the way in, and we're just going back and forth. These are called straddle axials. Straddle axials you can do as a prep for some liftoffs in that same range. Here we're going to go from bear, and we're not going to stay here that long. You can do your pals and rails there if you'd like, but from here we'll go into our 90-90 hip hinge, And so getting into the 90-90 position from bear, and then opening up the back hip, keeping the front knee and front foot on the ground, creating a radiation by squeezing the fist together, and keeping that back foot on the ground as a pivot point, and then transferring and transitioning over to the other side to do the same thing on the back hip. Okay, noticing if you're able to open up that hip or not, and if you need, you can also use some supports like blocks, or you can also stand up and do this on a box. Really like these. Many people in the FRC community perform these almost ritualistically. So here would be our 90-90 hip axials. So we're going to lift off the foot and knee off the ground. And from here, we're going to go into external rotation and then internal rotation. So external rotation, knee goes up. Internal rotation, knee goes down. Nice and controlled, not slamming the foot or knee on the ground. Again, transferring, getting the other side, performing the same hip axial on the back or the trowel leg, opening up and coming back down. I like this with the foot dorsiflexed, knee totally bent, and going from external to internal rotation from the 90-90 position. So this would be hip axials from the 90-90 position. From here, we'll go into a side lying position. We'll start off with a knee controlled articular rotation. So out, up, in, down, out, externally rotate tibia, in, internally rotate tibia, flex and extension of the knee. I really like this one because it gives us a lot of irradiation because we're in hip flexion. From here, we're going to do a pigeon liftoff. Basically, we're bending our knee, abducting our hip, and then lifting it off the ground for about 5 seconds, holding it there, and really trying to pull that foot up toward your hands. So going deep into external rotation. And from here, what we'll do is bring the bottom leg forward, almost in a 90-90 position with the back leg abducted, and we're just doing a external rotation lift off. And what we're doing is just going to our end range and then trying to pull up off the ground for about 3 to 5 seconds, and noticing that I'm getting higher and higher up here. So using my hands as supports, and here we have a hip abduction lift off and also a knee hinge. So this would be great to improve hip abduction and also create some more space in hip abduction. Okay, so from here, what we'll do is get the other side, laying down on that side lying position, going to the knee controlled articular rotation to start, jacking that knee all the way up as high as you can, up by the shoulder, squeezing the fists together. You can also hold on to a kettlebell here or push into the wall. You could also have your back foot pushing into the wall. So all these things I'm doing can be manipulated somehow. Here's our pigeon liftoff. Again, trying to pull that foot toward the hands and trying to bring that knee down actually. So notice that my knee is up. I'm trying to bring my knee down and foot up. So it's really hard, really challenging for hip external rotation. Again, we're going to do our external rotation liftoff from our abduction 90 position. So our front knee is at 90. And then slowly, as you see me do here, going up a little bit at a time to make it harder. So I started with a regression, and I'm starting to progress by coming up a little bit further, irradiating by squeezing the fist to create more muscle recruitment, to be able to control that end range a little bit further. And then also going with my hip abduction liftoff and turning that hip abduction liftoff into a knee hinge, controlling both the hip and the knee in this position. Getting a lot of neurological feedback here, really great for the hip and the knee all at the same time. So this would be our hip abduction liftoff and knee hinge. After this, we'll go to our hands and knees, and then we'll go to our stomach and lay on our stomach. Flatten the hands, tee out the arms, bend one knee, dorsiflex the foot, and from here, we're going to lift up and away toward the ceiling into full hip extension. From hip extension, we'll go into hip abduction, press into the ground, tuck the hips, push that opposite foot into the ground. We're going to lift up and go over to the outside and internally rotate at the end there, lift up and away and around and back. And we'll try the other side. Bend the knee, foot goes up toward the sky. Pretend there's a string pulling your foot up toward the sky. So you're deep into hip extension. You could do 3 of these and then stop, and then you could also do 3 of the abductions, but I'm just doing 1 rep here. So abduction, hover, slowly bring it down, and from this position you can go into internal rotation liftoffs. So if you're working on internal rotation, this would be another way to tackle that hip, and then going out of this, lifting up and away and back to your extension, down and relax. So that would be hip extension. From here, prone tricep or elbow hinge, so pressing the elbows into the ground like you're in a chaturanga position, and then taking an inhale, irradiating and lifting off. Remember, for all these liftoffs, you want to inhale, brace your whole body, and then squeeze, use maximal tension throughout this entire range of motion. And all we're doing here is lifting off, extending the elbows, and then slowly bringing them down. From here, we have a thoracic extension modality where we're going to have 1 elbow press into the ground and 1 elbow lift up toward the sky. I call that just a unilateral thoracic extension liftoff. And you can do this also with blocks on the ground. So if you could put your elbows on blocks and you could raise it up. Here I have my palms on the upper back, and I'm lifting both elbows up at the same time, turning this into a prone swimmer. Forehead, don't want to press too hard into the ground. You maybe use a cloth there to support your forehead. And for my swimmer hover, back of the hands lift up. They're going to elbow hinge, straighten the elbows, and then they're going to externally rotate as they flex overhead and place the elbows on the ground. Notice that I have my palms facing my back, getting a little bit more extension of the thoracic here, going back to my swimmer. Palms face down, elbow hinge behind the back of the hands on the back, lift up and away, hinge, externally rotate, again bend the elbows and relax. From here we'll go into a Sphinx position, and I just generally like to perform some controlled articular rotations of the neck here, trying to alleviate any type of tension that I may have caused throughout any of those exercises. Always important to go through the controlled articular rotations to save your work in whatever mobility exercises that you're doing. From here, child pose, shoulder flexion liftoffs, pressing 1 hand into the ground and then lifting the opposite hand up toward the sky. These would just be called shoulder flexion passive range liftoffs. All right, so that was full body mobility.